Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. Google searched, 5 o'clock in the morning, the tax inspectors came to their Paris headquarters, Google France, which says that it has done nothing illegal. We invited Google to join our conversation. They instead sent us their communique. Taking part, though, former Google consultant Jérôme de Rosa. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Cody Olson, who advises clients on data protection and privacy for CIO Consulting. Fabrice Epelboin of Yogosha IT Security, who also teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. And for part two of our discussion, we say hello to reporter Edouard Perrin of Première Ligne Productions, who's worked a lot on the LuxLeaks scandal. Thank you for being with us. Edouard, would you say that without the LuxLeaks affair, with those 343 companies that were outed, we wouldn't be having the pressure that continues to be brought on companies like Google?
Definitely. I wouldn't say that LuxLeaks on its own was the factor that made this, but LuxLeaks indeed somehow crystallized a lot of what was going on in the public opinion without having much traction with the political elites, not only in France but in Europe. I've been working on this case for now 5 years, and the climate is very different, especially when you talk about the GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook companies, because they basically created models that didn't exist, and for quite some time, tax authorities around the world were not able to grasp really what was going on. And if they knew what was going on, they didn't know where exactly they could have some checks on the activities of various companies. And I remember for the second documentary I produced in 2013. I looked at Apple, and Apple at the time just acknowledged under oath in front of the U.S. Senate whether or not they had a secret tax agreement with Ireland, and they were forced to agree that they had a 2% tax agreement with Ireland. And I asked the same question to the Irish Prime Minister, Enda Kenny, and the Prime Minister was not able to even agree on what the Apple executive had said under oath. He did not agree there was an agreement. So you see how long we've gone on this issue. Now I think the fact that you have dozens of policemen raiding Google headquarters in France shows that the political will might be there.
All right, that you're bringing up an important point, which is how all roads seem to lead to Ireland when it comes to corporate tax evasion in the EU. It has a name, what we're talking about. It's called the double Irish-Dutch sandwich. We can show you a graph courtesy of the Daily Mail. This is the simple version, by the way. It shows you, let you see, the money leaves from London, goes to Ireland, and then royalties are paid in the Netherlands before going on to Bermuda. That's the simple version, by the way. There's another version of the graph where the money goes back to Ireland. That's why it's called the double Irish. Dublin promising to phase out the double Irish. Edouard Perrin, your reaction? What's been the reaction where you are? You're in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to this raid on Google France's headquarters. Do people say well done to the French for cracking down, or are they saying this is sour grapes from an old continent that doesn't understand the internet?
I haven't seen, to be frank, a reaction to this. I mean, it's not on the top of the news, definitely, but that's not really surprising. I remember a few weeks or months ago that the U.S. Treasury complained to the European Union authorities about what was going on with corporations in Europe. You mentioned the fact that Ireland, I mean, all the ways lead to Ireland. They don't always lead to Ireland. There are plenty of ways where companies can do what they call tax optimization, which is an euphemism for most of the time some tax avoidance or some tax evasion. Again, Google company said in a communique that all was legal. I remember when I started working on this, I was talking to a tax lawyer, and he said the difference between tax optimization and tax evasion most of the time is the width of a prison jail wall. And when you look at the schemes that are cooked up in the accounting and auditing firms, they have a matrix of risks, and whether companies want to take the risk of being caught by the tax authorities, it's up to them. But they know there is a risk. If you see what happened to McDonald's, has been in an investigation. Amazon is still in another investigation at the European level this time. And as soon as you start digging in the schemes, you see that the way companies assess the value they make in any country is subject to much discussion.
Cody Olson, after the financial crisis in 2008, there was a lot of anger, public anger, against auditing firms because they said, "Oh, these guys rubber-stamped the books in some cases, loans in other cases that shouldn't have been approved." We found out with LuxLeaks because it was people who were working inside one of those auditing firms that it's all still going on. Do you think that anything has changed? And with the Panama Papers now, is anything going to change?
No, things did not change. I don't think that things have changed as much as we would like it to have been since 2008. However, the new regulation, going back to the regulation, at the European Union level, the European Union tried to adopt different types of regulation and directives to really fight against this type of practices, to help create stability for the European economic situation. However, these directives and regulations need to be translated into national law. And given that time period, which can be long, we are just starting to see these regulations be adopted in national law. Therefore, I would say that in the next coming years, months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, we start seeing more procedures against these types of organizations that rubber stamp.
All right. Google ubiquitous around the world. Here in France, it's what, close to 90% of the search engine?
More than 90%.
More than 90% of search engine visits are on Google. And it's tricky for public authorities. On the one hand, they're cracking down. On the other, they have strong ties with them. Back in 2013, France's culture minister, at the time Aurélie Filippetti was her name, she refused to attend the opening of Le Lab. That's Google's Cultural Institute in Paris. She was replaced by the then junior minister for digital economy, Fleur Pellerin. The state can criticize, but the ties that bind are there. With, for instance, the Google Art Project, which shows works from French public museums on the internet. And that raises another issue, which has to do with tax. It's called philanthropy. Google may be discreet about taxes, but it's very vocal when it comes to charity. Last year, the Google Foundation had Paris host what it calls the Impact Challenge, granting good causes 500,000 euros in scholarships or funds. And there is this fine line where, on the one hand, philanthropy seems to be genius, Cody Olson, because I'm sorry for being cynical, but is Google being virtuous, or are they dodging tax when they have, the cultural institutes, when they have these scholarship funds for entrepreneurs?
This type of tactic is not new. This tactic has been around for decades. It's a way for a company to help write off some of its profits, giving it to philanthropy, and then therefore they have to pay less taxes. So it's not a new tactic. It's not only linked to Google, but it's a very nice tactic. It's a very useful one.
Jérôme Desrosats, at the same time that the French state is at war with Google over taxes, how are they cooperating? How close are the ties between the state and Google?
Google can help the state in what is the most important today for European state is finding how to nurture an ecosystem of startups, French startups. And these French startups, today they get fundings, but usually just to start, some seed fundings we call, But to grow up, they will need some more funds, and also they will need to be acquired so that investors can reinvest in local startups. And I think today where Google and the French government can work together is how Google can help local French startups go global.
Do they work together?
I think they try. Google make a few announcements, but if you look at the facts, over the past years, Google has only acquired 2 startups that I know of, one in Brittany and one in Paris. And if you look just across the channel in the UK, they have bought lots of startups, including DeepMind, the startup that worked on the Go playing artificial intelligence. And they are investing a lot. They have thousands of employees. They are helping the local ecosystem. That's the key. It's not a short-term tax gain. It's investing in the local ecosystem and making sure French startups can grow.
All right, the need for a public-private partnership when it comes to making internet companies grow. And by the way, the CEO of parent company Alphabet would not comment on Tuesday's raid in Paris, but he was attending a startup fest in Amsterdam Tuesday, a conference attended by bosses from Apple, Uber, Airbnb. There, Eric Schmidt chastised Europeans for not investing enough public money into research.
What happens when I meet with governments is they all say yes, and they listen very politely. They're always very nice. Europeans are always very polite. And then they don't do anything about it. So if you want to do something, I'm serious, right? There is a model for entrepreneurship. It requires risk capital, serious investments in the universities, and then sort of tolerating the crazy ideas of the young people coming out of it, giving them some seed funding and letting them do it, right? And getting out of their way. That model works. It's produced this extraordinary wealth in America. It is repeatable in Europe.
Fabrice Epelboin?
It's not that simple. Europe is nearly as big as the United States, but it's not really a country. It's more than 20 different countries, different culture, different language. It's not really a market, at least for French startup. It's way more difficult than for an American startup where you have nearly 500 million people next door.
But the message we're hearing from him is, hey, come on, the private sector is investing in research and development. Why isn't the state doing more? And by the way, we heard this week the French state is reducing its research budget for institutes of higher learning.
Probably because you don't raise enough tax money. I mean, there has to be a link between multinational corporations not paying taxes and the state being poor to the point where they're not funding anymore research. Universities are really in a bad shape in France, and getting seed capital is a major challenge in France.
Edouard Perrin, you're on the campus of a university right now. Just how much is the private sector involved in making these companies grow? These giants that you mentioned, like Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, which are all U.S. companies, not European companies.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, here it's pretty common that you have companies investing into university, into programs. But I'd like to go back to the comments Mr. Schmidt made in Amsterdam yesterday. I mean, of course, the public sector should invest, but one needs taxes and resources to do so, and it's pretty cynical from that person to utter this statement when one knows how much he's avoiding to pay taxes in a certain number of countries, not only in Europe but elsewhere. I mean, how can you expect the public sector to invest when the coffers are completely depleted? The other thing is, you mentioned the kind of soft power strategy Google has. One shall not forget that Google has invested some money into the press sector in France in the recent years, part of an agreement with the government. And I think that was very clever on their part, because now they have some money, not that much money for Google, but for the medias that are involved, it's a lot of money, and they are in that way able to have some influence.
Yeah, because Fabrice Epelboin, a couple of years ago, you remember there was a French bill introduced for a so-called Google tax.
Yep.
They've also tried it at the European level. What is it? A tax, copyright tax, basically.
It's not an investment. Let's be clear. It's some money.
But this Google tax, this talk of a Google tax, it's gone quiet.
It just disappeared. But basically, Google settled this in a very clever way. They bought the press. They give something like 60 million, if I remember well, 60 million euro to the press, the French press, yearly. So they're pretty sure that the press will be nice with them because they get to decide who is going to get this money and who is not. Exactly like the French government is giving money to the press. They give money to the press they like. Google is doing exactly the same thing, and it has exactly the same debilitating results on our national press.
Jérôme de Rosa?
I'm not sure they are buying the press.
60 million.
It was the justification, I think, was to help the press modernize because they were not investing enough in digital topics. So it was to help them be more present. And of course, I think the benefit for Google is that they get the press goes online, so people use more on the internet, they search more, they generate more revenues, they use Google technologies maybe instead of Microsoft technologies. That's the real benefit, is also to help the Google tools. But it's not directly a way to help Google fight against the state. The proof is that the states, when they want to make a quick buck, they send a few
it's a way
policemen.
to ease out any press willing to tell the real story about Google. Tell, for example, that Google is far away from the "Don't beat evil" motto they had initially. And it's a way for the press not to investigate. For example, the little quote we started this show with about global surveillance and the French sovereignty over foreign company on his soil. We don't have any. We lost this sovereignty, and to regain some sovereignty, we're using typewriters basically, because we have the United States facing us. They have tremendous powers when it comes to surveillance, and if you want to investigate an American company in France, there is no way you can do this using electronic means. That's a major problem. It should be raised as a problem for the nation in French newspaper, and I bet you it won't be raised.
Edouard Perrin, do you agree that it's much, much harder to write negative stories about Google than it used to be?
I don't know whether it's more difficult to investigate Google than another gigantic company such as Apple or Google or Amazon. Most of the time, these people do not communicate to reporters that are investigating them. I remember Amazon wasn't even able to get a no. They never answered at all. And that's a difficulty because you don't get to have the contradiction, which is one of the basic points of our job. So I don't know whether Google is more difficult to investigate for the reasons your interlocutor mentioned, and I'm not that familiar with the surveillance issue, but the sheer size of these companies make it really difficult. That's why cooperative and collaborative reporting is a tool that we as reporters should use more and more, and because it has more impact and because it's way more efficient to address these particular issues in corporations when you go with dozens of reporters around the world rather than on your own, either in France or elsewhere.
As was the case with both LuxLeaks and the Panama Papers. Cody Olson, I'm haunted by what Fabrice Epelboin said, basically that, the U.S. owns the internet, game over.
It's not as simple as that. There is definitely a fight for net neutrality and to keep the internet open to everyone. That is definitely a fight that should be fought, and we see activists all around the world keeping that going. Does the United States spy on everyone? Most likely. Do we have proof of that? Yes, we've had proof of that. Is it legal? In some cases, no. In some cases, yes. Now is the time for other activists to bring up these subjects and say, hey, we're not okay with this.
The French activists like Quadrature du Net, who was the biggest activist group in France, stopped being activists last week. And basically, their final newsletter was saying, that's a battle we lost. That's the situation right now.
But we get the sense that public powers, again, I'm bringing it back to this tax issue, are stepping in. It was the former French finance minister, who's now an EU commissioner, who said that tax avoidance is equivalent now to the that's being lost in the EU is the equivalent of the GDP of Bulgaria.
That's for sure. That's big amounts. That are big amounts. But I think the problem that also the tax offices have is that they are not at the level on a technical point of view. They're still thinking like they were dealing with the local companies, like the industrial companies that kept their records in the same place. They were still dealing with people who were writing everything on paper. Times have changed, and I'm not sure they got all the experts helping them understand how technology works and in this particular context, how the money goes around and how the decision goes around.
Yeah, you have to realize that the people who are heading those administrations were born in the 50s. So basically, their understanding of the world was molded when they were at school in the 70s. So the world today is a mystery to them, a total mystery. And they're heading, even if they're heading youngsters who kind of realize what's going on a technological point of view, those guys are not deciding anything. So yeah, of course, the world is changing at a really, really fast pace. And here we are today. Our French administration, where they are looking at a foreign company, an American foreign company, cannot use any electronic medium to communicate because they'll be intercepted by the NSA, and the NSA will pass the information to the American company. It's the way it works today.
Cody Olson?
The NSA does not have the powers to spy on every company in the world.
It does. It really does. You should have a second thought about the Snowden files. It does.
Does it have the capabilities? Yes. Does it have a legal basis to do it?
No, they don't care.
Not necessarily. The NSA has a legal basis to spy on foreign nationals if they believe that they are a threat to the United States national security.
Excuse me, I can't let you say that. According to Snowden's revelation, every time a contract is made over, I think, $10 million involving an American company and a foreign company, the foreign company is spied on every time. Those are written inside NSA document leaked by Edward Snowden.
Whether or not these practices are legal, that is one question.
No, they're not legal. Who cares?
But that is the question that we need to be asking ourselves. Is it legal? Is this what they should be doing? That's why we create oversight mechanisms.
What Jean-Claude Juncker did was not legal. He is heading the European Commission. What the NSA is doing is not legal. They don't care. I mean, this is the world we're living in. The world is not ruled by law today.
It's certainly something that we're going to continue to talk about. Fabrice Epelboin, thanks so much for coming in. I want to thank Cody Olson as well. Jérôme de Rosard, and from Ann Arbor, Michigan, Edouard Perrin. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. One man who's been snooping is our own James Creedon.
Hi, François. Just a quick look at some headlines and how the buzz has been playing out since yesterday when this raid took place in Paris. You can see that some of the graphics are pretty interesting. Tech stop. I suppose the problem is we can't really seem to put a stop to certain practices. Google, of course, not being the only company that is getting I suppose, tough treatment from Brussels and indeed now from Paris and elsewhere. Amazon and Facebook have often been accused as well of avoiding taxes, of paying their full taxes. You can see that graphic there looking a little bit less harmonious today, perhaps. Over 100 French tax administrative staff were searching Google Paris yesterday, of course, and that was a lot of buzz going across social media about that. And the argument that they are based in Ireland, of course, that was being used in defense of Google and being tweeted on social media. Google's slogan, "Don't be evil," that was being thrown back in their face somewhat. Pay your tax. For once, you could respect your own mantra, says Jonathan O'Fray on Twitter. It was also getting a certain amount of attention in the UK press, where indeed similar issues have emerged and similar questions about paying the full tax bill. And one UK headline that was being tweeted was, "Here's how to do it." So looking at how the French authorities were dealing with this question and I suppose giving it the 2 thumbs up. French raid Google over unpaid 1.2 billion tax bill. Others thinking that this is too much of a strong-arm approach and perhaps unwelcome. France and EU officially have declared war against Google. This is something that Georgios Achilleas seems not to be too pleased about. And as of course you were talking about in your debate, François, it's not the only issue. The issue of taxes is not the only point of tension between Google and French or EU authorities. Other such matters, such as the right to be forgotten, which is something that the EU has been defending, and the French authorities as well. Google is challenging that. So many, many points of tension that are also getting an echo on social media.
All right, also getting an echo on social media. Jérôme de Rosam, I'm still haunted by what you said earlier in our conversation about, in any case, most of this stuff is on the cloud anyway. Do you feel that the Google brand will be dented in any way from all this?
I don't see how, basically. Maybe people will think, okay, all these big companies are trying to avoid tax, but I think people will continue to use Google because they are useful. After all, their products are used by a lot of people. It's not because people were first to use them. It's because they were better. They were alternatives at the time, and they took over. And now people will continue to use Google. Maybe they would like that Google pay more taxes in France, or maybe they would like that they buy more startups or create more jobs. But it's not because they want that Google will do it. Google will do it because the French government create an environment that is adapted to that.
All right, and we'll continue to see how this story plays out. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.